All right, welcome to the UAB May meeting. We're going to call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the call to order and the roll call for the members. So staff could do the roll call.
Okay, Member Porter?
Here.
Member Wheeler?
Here.
Member Jacobson?
Here.
Member Crow? I see that he's there. Member Rockwell?
Here.
Member Miles?
Here.
Member Davis?
Here.
Member Sperlingwood? Okay, I see that she's there.
Yeah.
I think I don't have well, actually I do have a list. So that's everyone. Oh, Member Fultz. Member Fultz is missing. He told me that he may not be able to start this early. So yes,
Okay.
Everyone is present except Member Fultz.
Okay. Usually at this time, we'll do an adoption of the minutes from the last meeting. Due to scheduling conflict, those minutes didn't get included. So we need a motion to delete that item from the consent agenda.
So move.
We already have a motion and a second. All right. Do I have any citizens comment on deleting that item from the consent agenda?
Sorry, no, sir, you don't.
Thank you. Hearing no citizen comment, and we'll do a roll call through staff for the yays or nays on this. All in favor of deleting the minutes from the consent agenda?
Okay, Chair Porter?
Aye.
Member Wheeler?
Aye. Aye.
Member Miles?
Aye.
Member Rockwell?
Aye.
Member Crow?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it.
Okay. Let's see. And I guess once we've done that, the next thing on our item on our list is the adoption of the agenda. So do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So move. Second.
Second.
All right. So we have a motion and a second from that. And again, do we have any citizens comment on the agenda for this afternoon?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you. So I have staff do a roll call on to approve that agenda.
Chair Porter?
Aye.
Member Wheeler?
Aye.
Member Jacobson? Member Jacobson, you're muted.
Davis, I can't vote on it.
I got an aye from you. Member Miles?
Aye.
Okay, Member Rockwell?
Aye.
Member Crow?
Aye.
Okay, okay, that's it. That's all the voting members. Thank you. The ayes have it.
All right. So that's for the agenda for this afternoon's meeting. And we only have one item operating under the rules of this situation we're in, only essential business. And we have one item tonight, and that begins with a presentation.
Tom Brown. I'm Chief Operating Officer for GRU, and I'm pleased to be bringing a proposal before the board, looking for recommendation possibly to move it forward to the City Commission. It's for a 50 megawatt solar PPA with Regis Energy. When we started this project, it's been close to 2 years ago in total. I think we really started with a couple underlying foundation premises, and one is that whatever project that we would come to to bring to you would basically have a cost structure in it that would result in no upward rate pressure. At worst, it would be rate neutral. And as we sit here today, I can tell you it will be rate negative. It's not significant, but it'd be some. We basically, our average price of power when we started was last year was $37. And with the price of natural gas declining like it has in the last month or so, the average price has even dropped even further. But I will tell you that this proposal will remain below our average price even as it exists today. The other fundamental premise was that the size of the facility and the technology that we would come to you with would complement our existing generation fleet and work well within our balancing authority. And I think if you remember, I think it was back in November, we came to the UAB with an update on where we were at with solar. And we had a presentation entitled Here Comes the Sun. And in there, we outlined some of the technical constraints that we have to deal with in selecting this facility. And I think in short summary, we actually have to design it for our low load morning input point, and not necessarily what you would like to do ultimately. And that is, you know, have something that would fit in the high end production summer months. So that's kind of where we were coming from with that. I've mentioned this project, you know, multiple times at multiple UAB meetings over the last year. So it's really nice to actually get to this point with the project. This was actually a joint effort with collaboration of many people across many departments, you know, within GRU, including our purchasing, legal, finance, energy supply, and energy delivery. A lot of people. There were quite a few meetings where we had, you know, 30 folks involved. The learning curve for us was steep. We actually conducted multiple studies over the last couple of years. One of them was an area control error study called an ACE study. And also we did an update to our integrated resource plan. That was conducted for us by TEEP, the Energy Authority. So again, those studies were done to try and determine how much solar we could bring into our present system and still operate normally. There were a significant amount of time and resources dedicated to understanding the state of the solar marketplace and the various technologies that are available. We actually brought in 8 different vendors to our facilities to present their wares and what they were doing in the marketplace. And we also had personnel travel to various solar farms at different utilities. Some of them were big, some of them were small. So we got to see the technology in place. We found that while the technology for solar panels and power converters, solar trackers, and battery storage, they continue to evolve. The technology as it exists today could make economic sense as well as an environmental sense for GRU and its customers. And that's why we're talking to you today. An integral part of this project was actually the development of the ITN, the intent to negotiate. It was recognized very early on that what GRU needed technically was a bit unique and had to be clearly defined. It's different than just building a straight pure solar farm. We integrated batteries and other controls in it so that we can have a certain amount of control over the facility. We simply could not build a utility scale solar project without making sure it would fully integrate with the rest of our facilities. The solicitation was actually sent out to 390 potential vendors. We had 6 respondents. From those, we did negotiations with 3 of them, discussions and negotiations, and it produced Regis Energy out of Miami as a successful vendor. We believe that this 50 megawatt project is the next step for GRU to move forward toward the goal of 100% renewable energy by 2045. It's big enough to make a difference. Depending on which fossil technology the solar energy is replacing, this project is expected to reduce our fossil CO2 emissions by 65,000 to 130,000 tons per year. If your solicitation was actually sent out to 390 potential vendors, we had 6 respondents. From those, we did negotiations with 3 of them, discussions and negotiations. I'm not sure what's going on. Are we okay?
You're fine now.
Okay. I'm not sure what that was all about. Yeah, so depending on which fossil technology the solar energy is replacing, we're expected to reduce the fossil fuel emissions from GRU by 65,000 to 130,000 tons per year. If you're displacing coal, it would be close to 130,000 tons. If you're displacing gas generation, it'd be in the 65,000 ton. So it is significant. It will provide about 5% of GRU's electrical supply on an annual basis. That's about, the project's actually about 127,000 megawatts is what we're expecting. And that percentage is based on our normal consumption, was about 2 million megawatt hours per year consumed. The project will increase GRU's percentage of green output from 33%.
We have a question from Member Sperlingwood. She had her hand raised.
Yeah, go ahead, Teresa. I don't think Teresa heard that.
Oh, I had to unmute. I said it sounded on the broadcast, on a live broadcast, there were 2 or 3 people talking. Somebody might want to check that.
Okay, so you didn't have a question then?
No.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Okay, not a problem. And I really wasn't doing a ventriloquist act. It was only just me talking here. So anyway, this project's expected to increase GRU's percentage of green output from 33%, which is what we achieved last year, into the range of 38%. So it's about a 5% increase. We're getting there with it. It's a large project relative to GRU's average load, which is about 220 megawatts. So it's 50 megawatts gross on a 220 megawatt average load. In fact, if you look at this on a percentage basis, what we're going to be recommending to do here is actually represents a larger portion of GRU's net generation than the 10,000 megawatts of solar generation FPL is integrating into its system over the next 10 years. And they're kind of sneaking up on it. They're doing about 1,000 megawatts a year over the next 10 years. From a technical perspective, this is as big a project as we believe our generation and distribution systems could respond to while maintaining the requirements of being a load balancing entity. And I know there were some questions posed by Member Wheeler, and we'll address those at the end to kind of expand upon that a little bit. This will clearly be a foundation for GRU to build upon going forward. We'll be making the presentation today, at the end of which we'll be asking for the recommendation approval to take the proposal forward to the City Commission. With that, I think we'll turn to the presentation. We have 3 presenters today. Chuck Height, Project Manager, will be leading off, followed by Jamie Versage, our Manning Utility Analyst Planning, and Eric Walters, Administration and Fuels Operations. At the end of the presentation, we will be glad to answer questions. We'll go through the questions previously submitted, and we'll do our best to try and answer whatever questions might be out there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Chuck Height.
To this point, as well as the timeline. And to point out also that there are a number of tweaks, very minor ones, that are on some of the slides in the presentation, since we were unable to change it from the time it was published. So in the interest of clarity, we'll try to point those out as we go. On this slide, you can see a abbreviated timeline noting the dates for the prior UAB and commission meetings, being 2 of the notable changes. We've tweaked those dates to correct them, but we'll go into some additional detail on the individual milestones as we go along as the presentation continues. But, following up on Tom's comment, I'd like to point out that the project team has been working on this for over a year at this point, and it's gone through a number of milestones at this point. As a general overview, GRU has for many years been active in renewable energy. As you can see, we've got 26 megawatts of solar in our current portfolio, both through the feed-in tariff as well as our net metering programs. We have 100.3 megawatts of biomass power, and that's true baseload capacity, so it's not subject to intermittency, and it's available after sunset. That totals to 129 megawatts of renewable capacity, which we believe to be well above any other Florida utility as a percentage of load served. As for our renewable energy future, a solar PPA was selected because it has the following attributes. A GRU solar PPA would be more affordable than other forms of renewable energy, including rooftop solar, due to the federal investment tax credits and the large economies of scale associated with the number of panels and other hardware that go into a large-scale field. A GRU solar PPA would also benefit all customers, including those that are low income, as well as customers that wouldn't otherwise be able to access solar. For instance, we've got a large number of customers that live in condos or apartments or homes where the roof line isn't suitable for solar panels, or maybe they're shaded with some of our beautiful tree canopy here in Gainesville. So it really provides a benefit to all customers. And a PPA would also be, as Tom mentioned, it would make a significant impact and put us well on our way towards 100% renewable goal by 2045. So let's talk about the ITN process for a moment. GRU assembled a team consisting of engineers from the energy supply and energy delivery groups. So basically that's power production as well as the transmission and distribution folks, as well as our procurement and our utility attorney to determine how best to move forward on the PPA. One of the first things the team did was bring on board an outside attorney with significant experience in renewable energy PPAs, including solar, to help guide us through the process and to successfully negotiate an agreement. The team was committed to ensure that the ITN and any subsequent PPAs must address both GRU's technical and commercial goals, as well as address community goals. And we'll speak to these in a few minutes as the presentation continues. An important factor was that the team had to satisfy these goals to move forward with any potential agreement. We didn't feel pressure at any point in the process to come to a deal. And at the same time, the ITN was kept flexible in certain areas that allow for the most competitive landscape. For instance, one area was that we allowed proposals between 40 and 50 megawatts, assuming that maybe there would be a parcel of property that could only geographically handle 40 megawatts, and we would open that up to a potential competition as well for proposals. And this increased the number of potential sites available for developers because, as I said, it opened up more parcels. And with that, as for the ITN results, here's how the process worked. The ITN document itself was prepared by GRU staff, reviewed by the in-house and outside attorneys, and was sent to 390 potential bidders through GRU's, or actually the commercially available DemandStar electronic bidding system that we use at GRU. This included vendors that had previously met with GRU, as Tom mentioned, but it also included a lot of other potential bidders as well across the country, and many other bidders that we knew to be in the business of providing solar PPAs. We received proposals from 6 different firms and began evaluating the proposal, ultimately shortlisting 3 vendors based on other applicable criteria, including cost and qualifications. And then we issued a request for improved offers with supplemental conditions and hosted on-site interviews with the 3 shortlisted bidders, virtual negotiations, and ultimately selected the preferred bidder based on price, commercial terms, and technical aspects. For the high-level results, the team successfully negotiated a contract with Miami-based Origis Energy, and Jamie in a few moments will provide some more information on them and their company later in the presentation. The contract will be with a subsidiary that they formed, a project-specific subsidiary, which is common in the industry, called Florida Solar 6 LLC. And the contract itself is modeled again after many other solar PPAs. PPAs are the primary methodology used by municipal utilities across the country for solar capacity, and both nationally as well as statewide. The contract addresses all of GRU's technical and commercial goals, and Jamie will go over those in a few moments. So, Jamie?
Good afternoon, UAB Chair and members. My name is Jamie Vershaw, and I'm a managing analyst in energy supply. When this project comes online, it's going to be pushing energy onto GRU's transmission system, and that energy is going to impact the rest of GRU's generation fleet. This project is going to be located in our community, and we want to be good stewards of our community and our environment. Also, this project is going to be around for at least 20 years. Because of all these factors, GRU has some goals for the project, including technical goals, commercial or financial goals, and community goals. I'm going to review these goals that GRU had for the project and how these goals are going to be achieved. The first set of goals we had were technical goals, focusing on how this solar system's output is going to interact with the rest of GRU's traditional generation. Delivering energy reliably is all about matching supply with demand. GRU always has to match the electricity demanded from its customers with electricity supplied from its generating units. They have to do this in real time and have to do it all the time. If you don't keep this balance, you push or pull energy from your neighboring utilities through your transmission ties. NERC has limits on how much and how often you can push or pull energy, and there can be very stiff financial penalties if you do this too much. Now, most of GRU's traditional generation is made by heavy turbines being turned around and around by either steam or burning natural gas. And these turbines are then connected to an electrical generator. And there are limits to how quickly you can ramp up and ramp down the electrical output of these rotating machines before you cause damage. However, solar generation doesn't work that way. Solar output depends, of course, upon the amount of sunlight hitting the solar panels, but its electrical output varies almost instantly with changing cloud cover. GRU's first technical goal was to get some level of control over solar intermittency and the ramping rate of the solar system's electrical output up and down. In the ITN, GRU put a limit of 3 megawatts per minute up or down on the system's output. Origis is achieving this by incorporating a large battery capable of instantaneously discharging 12 megawatts and storing 24 megawatt hours of energy. This will apply smoothing to the system's electrical output. It will give time for GRU's rotating units to ramp up and down along with it. This battery will also be among the largest batteries in Florida. GRU worked with the engineering firm Burns McDonald to evaluate how much solar capacity we could add to the system. The study was done, was an evaluation of GRU's area control error, or more commonly called ACE, ACE. And Tom talked about this a little bit, and they did this under a lot of different scenarios. And this ACE is a measure of how well GRU matches its electrical demand with its electrical supply without pushing or pulling energy to or from its neighboring utilities. Burns and McDonald took into account GRU's existing electrical generation and modeled these units tripping offline and GRU suddenly losing a transmission tie under a lot of different combinations. And this study concluded that GRU can add solar, but beyond about 50 megawatts of additional solar, GRU would probably need to add some sort of quick start generation to back up the intermittent solar energy. And so the ITN requested proposals for between 40 and 50 megawatts. GRU also needed the ability to curtail, which means to not accept all or part of the system output at times. A good example of this is in the spring and fall, during the mornings in particular. GRU customer load can be near its minimum for the entire year. And during these times, GRU's traditional generation units are sitting at the very bottom of where they can generate energy without tripping offline. And some of those spring and fall mornings, mostly between 8 and 10 a.m., the sun comes up and the solar facility output will ramp up very quickly. We talked previously that GRU has to match demand from its customers with energy supplied from its generators at all times. If GRU's traditional units are already sitting as low as they can go, and now we get a lot of solar energy being put onto the system, GRU is then overproducing energy and pushing energy onto its neighbors, which we cannot do for very long. So in the ITAN and in the PPA, it's specified that GRU can curtail up to 5% of the total system's annual output each year without penalty. Our models say that GRU shouldn't need to curtail more than 2 to 3% of the system's output in any year. And additionally, at the end of the year, if GRU curtails less than 5% of the system's output for the year, GRU is given a credit for its next energy invoice. So this approach has given GRU a good balance of operational flexibility and financial risk management. Next slide, please. Another decision GRU had to make was whether to locate the project somewhere outside of the area, maybe outside Alachua County, and bring the power through the transmission system, or to locate the facility nearby and directly connect it to GRU's grid. GRU chose to connect the facility directly to its grid. GRU buys and sells energy from other utilities when it is economical to do that. And these energy purchases and sales happen through GRU's transmission ties with Duke Energy and Florida Power and Light. These transmission ties have limitations on how much power you can push through them at any time. If the solar site was chosen outside of GRU's system, then the energy would need to flow through those transmission ties. That would mean that for every hour the sun is shining, 365 days per year, GRU's transmission ties, and that capacity would be partially taken up with that solar, which would mean every day would further limit how much power we could buy. So because of that, GRU chose to directly connect the solar system to our grid, which saves transmission tie capacity and avoids transmission charges. Another of GRU's goals was to avoid as much development risk as possible, such as land acquisition, permitting, and construction. All these risks, as well as the operational risks, will be taken by Origis. Next slide, please. Another goal, which was really make or break for the project, was that the project could not cause upward rate pressure. The cost of the energy from the solar facility will be less than the cost of GRU's average cost to make power, and its price is fixed for the 20-year term. GRU sought a minimum of a 20-year agreement and the optionality to purchase the solar facilities before the contract's expiration. The result is the PPA has a 20-year term with 2 additional 5-year terms at a price to be negotiated at those times. GRU also has the option to purchase the facility after 8, 12, and 16 years of operation at the end of the 20-year term and at any change in control of the facility. Next slide, please. Another goal was to achieve community commitment and environmental stewardship. These are some slides that are coming up that we'll delve into those and how those goals are being met. GRU had the goal to bring in as much solar as we could without creating technical issues like the ones we discussed earlier. With PPA being for 50 megawatts, GRU avoids those technical issues that we discussed. GRU's goal was to retain all of the green attributes for the project. In the PPA, it's written that GRU will own all the renewable energy credits, or RECs, associated with the solar production. GRU would also like to have the project online as soon as possible. The early project completion goal is December 31st, 2022, but in no case later than December 31st, 2023. An important goal to assuring the completion of the project was to find a solar provider that has a demonstrated history of developing, constructing, owning, and operating facilities of this scale, and also one that intends to own and operate the project over the long term. The selected vendor, Orgis, has a track record of completing projects of this scale, both around the world and in Florida. They have a history of owning and operating the facilities they build, and not just flipping the project to another company once they have a signed contract. We've discussed that this project will connect to the GRU grid. It'll happen at Parker Road substation. And as part of this, there will be an interconnection between this project and GRU's transmission. GRU will need to purchase and install some equipment to measure how much power is flowing, and some equipment to protect the rest of the transmission system so that a problem on the solar side of the interconnection does not cause a problem with the rest of GRU's transmission. The agenda item says that GRU would have about $3 million worth of work, but since that time, we've better defined the scope and how much work we'll need to do and how much equipment will cost. And GRU's interconnection cost for the project is now forecast to be less than $1 million, or around $1 million. So the capital funding for this will be included in GRU's traditional budget requests. Next slide, please. Over the next few slides, I'll tell you a little about the solar provider for this project, Orgis Energy. Orgis is familiar with doing projects in Florida. They have some in operation with the city of Tallahassee, one with Reedy Creek Improvement District, which serves Disney, and contracts with FMPA, which is Florida Municipal Power Association. Next slide, please. Orgis is headquartered in Miami, Florida. They have over a gigawatt, which is 1,000 megawatts of solar projects in operation. They have projects in Europe, South America, and North America. Next slide, please. Here are some figures of merit for the project. The project is 50 megawatts AC, and it will have a 12 megawatt battery with 2 hours of storage. It will be located south of the Parker Road substation, which is located on the corner of Archer Road and Parker Road. It will have single axis tracking, so the panels will tilt and follow the sun as it makes its way across the sky. There will be more than 150,000 solar panels, and it will have a step-up transformer from 34.5 thousand volts to 115,000 volts to connect to GRU's transmission system at Parker Road. Next slide, please. The facility will generate around 124,000 megawatt hours per year, which is about 6% of GRU's annual energy served. It will offset about 63,000 tons of carbon emissions annually. As Tom talked about earlier, depends on whether it's offsetting gas or coal. It could be higher than that. And it'll produce enough power for more than 10,000 homes. Orgis plans to begin the permitting process almost immediately and is aiming for commercial operation at the end of 2022. Orgis Technics will be the prime contractor. And at the peak of construction, there will be more than 220 people working on the project. Next slide, please. I previously mentioned that one of the goals of the project was to be good stewards of the environment and our community. And these are some of the ways that the project will help meet those goals. The project will have a public web interface where anyone can look at the facility's instantaneous output. Orgis has connected to ongoing collaboration with GRU to explore and participate in community outreach. Orgis has committed to being a sponsor to GRU's Brighter Tomorrow scholarship program. The project will use natural flowering ground cover to serve as a habitat for pollinators, and we'll use sheep for vegetation management to reduce mowing and uses of herbicides. The project will also include construction of an access road, an elevated viewing area, and educational placards at the site so that educators and visitors can learn and teach about solar energy and energy storage. Next slide, please. Looking ahead to when this project comes online, 2023, renewable energy generation serving GRU's customers will look something like this. There'll be about 79 megawatts of solar, which includes 50 megawatts from this project, 18.5 megawatts of solar feed-in tariff, and 11 megawatts from nearly 700 customer-owned net metered systems. There will also be about 107 megawatts of other renewable generation, including 103 megawatts of biomass, about 3.6 of landfill gas fuel power. In all, there will be more than 185 megawatts of renewable generation serving GRU's customers. Next slide, please.
Jamie, I just want to interrupt for a second. That's renewable generation capacity. It doesn't mean that that will convert into absolute hours over the period of time, but that is our capacity. Just to clarify.
Thank you. That's a good clarification.
I'll go back to sleep now.
All right, I'll spice it up, wake you up. We mentioned before that GRU has the highest percentage of renewable energy serving its customers in Florida, and this project expands that leadership. With this project, GRU can provide solar energy to all of its customers without upward rate pressure. The City Commission has given GRU the goal of providing 100% of its energy from renewable sources by 2045. And this project is the next step in that long journey towards 100% renewable energy. Next up, Eric Walters, he's going to take us through some of the frequently asked questions for this project.
Thank you, Jamie. Chair Porter and UAB members, my name is Eric Walters, and Admin and Fuels Operations Director for GRU Energy Supply. And I want to take this opportunity to go through some of the frequently asked questions dealing with the solar PPA and talk through some of those answers with you. And I believe after these questions, we'll then start addressing the questions that were submitted by the members and go through those. So the first question is would a solar facility increase electric rates? And the answer to that is no. You do have some ancillary costs, but the overall cost of the solar power is less than what GRU's average cost of power has been for the past year. So we do not expect it to have any upward pressure on rates. The second question is, how is this PPA different than the biomass contract? I know the term PPA gives this community some angst dealing with the previous biomass PPA, but the fact of the matter is that PPAs are a common vehicle used throughout the electric industry to purchase and sell power. And the fortunate thing about this is that solar PPAs are fairly common, and they're a fairly common vehicle used to purchase power, not only for municipal entities, but also for private entities. But to go into specifics, let's point out a few of them, the differences. So GRU will not have any fixed payments with this PPA. So in other words, we will only pay for the power that is delivered during the time period. So there's no capacity charges, no fixed payments, any of that. If there's no delivery of power, then GRU doesn't pay. We'll have the ability to curtail output year round. And as Jamie was saying there are certain times of year where the load is lower and the rapidly increasing, the rapid ramp rate of solar as it's coming on and going off sometimes provides some issues for our system with balancing, or we project it will. And so we do have the ability to curtail during certain times to allow for us to stay within compliance and also meet that time period and that ramp rate. GRU will also have the option to purchase the solar facility at years 8, 12, and 16. And I believe, as was mentioned before, Origis and a lot of these investment and developers are very protective of their investment tax credit. And so this first 8-year increment just basically says, hey, we're going to take full advantage of it. We're going to own it for a longer period of time. And the other options are just opportune periods for us to be able to evaluate, not the obligation, but have the opportunity to purchase. And it's also at a very competitive price. We feel that looking at the market and what we've seen and some of the other contracts that we've viewed, this is a very competitive price for what we're getting. We're getting a lot of battery backup and also some of the smoothing capabilities with that. The next question is, why doesn't GRU just build the facility itself? Why can't we just, own, operate, build, do all of that? Well, I think the biggest reason is that there are significant tax credits that are available to income tax paying developers that GRU would not be able to take advantage of. However, because these income tax credits are significant, it does help to lower the overall cost of the power and reduce the cost of the facility. That in turn reduces the solar energy cost that that GRU pays. So that is one benefit of not building the facility itself. There's also side benefits of not having to go through the construction risk and not having the CapEx or the capital expenditure to build it in the first place and taking on that additional risk and carrying that for our customers. So we're adding solar, but down the road, why will we also need to add fast response generation? And that's a fairly complex question. You got to follow that down 2 or 3 steps. But essentially, as Jamie was saying, we must match as a balancing authority our generation with our load at all times. NERC does not allow you to not match for very long periods of time, either push power to our neighbors or pull power from our neighbors for a long period of time. So we have to be able to match that as closely as possible. Coupled with that, solar is extremely variable based on the weather, based on cloud cover, based on the time of year. And it has a very steep ramp rate coming in and going out. And so we need the fast response generation to be able to respond to those changes. There will be days where it will be cloud cover for that day, and we have to find a way to replace that generation going forward with additional solar. There will be days where there will be rapid responses and rapid changes in the output of the solar facility itself. Our existing generation is very limited in how fast it can ramp up and ramp down to meet those changes, and that changes in output for solar. And so fast start generation down the road will be needed to manage any additional solar that we do put online. So what happens next? So a brief timeline, assuming that this project is approved, Origis Energy has already secured the land rights for the project, and they'll begin preliminary site layout, the best configuration for the panels to maximize output. They'll also start to apply almost immediately for any required permits. That's with Alachua County, the FAA, any environmental permits that need to be pulled. They'll begin that process, and they estimate that will probably take up to 1 year for all those approvals to be gained. Origis will apply for an interconnection agreement with GRU. So that's the agreement that governs, how we accept the power, how they're going to provide the power, what equipment may be needed, and what terms and conditions are surrounding that. Next slide, please. GRU will conduct any interconnection studies that are required on our side. So there are some regulatory studies that have to be done to say that, hey, this energy is not going to negatively affect our system. It's not going to negatively affect reliability. We'll also have to make sure that we complete some of the substation construction at the Parker Road, where we expect to put the power into our system, and also any land rights that go along with that for any equipment Origis needs to put in that substation. Origis will be responsible for design and construction of the grid tie up to a point of interconnection at Parker Road. And they'll be taking the lead on that as we go forward in this process. So that is all of the prepared questions that we answered. Are there any additional questions from the board?
Eric, why don't we take a list of the questions that the board members had submitted? I think we put them in a summary format, was sent out. If you have those in front of you, why don't you walk them through those questions and the answers to that? And then if there's any subsequent questions, we can entertain those as well. Is that okay with you?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay.
We do have one question, Tom. Member Jacobson has his hand raised.
I lowered my hand, so I'll let me
sorry.
see if the answers are already.
Carry on. Sorry.
I'm just trying to get those questions up here.
If you don't have them available, I have them here. I can pull them up as well and walk them through as well. Whatever works, Eric.
Okay, here, I've got them.
Okay.
All right, Chuck, I'm going to take control from you here. I think, there we go. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
All right. So these were a list of questions that were presented by the board, and we'll just walk through them briefly and hopefully clarify and answer those questions. So the first was from Member Crow, and as what is the per megawatt, the cost per megawatt proposed PV facility compared with other power options? The version of the proposed contract given the UAB have financial information redacted, but can GRU management provide information on the cost per megawatt hour and the other fuel sources such as oil and gas? So unfortunately, due to public records, the entity decided to redact all of the pricing. But we can say and can share with you that is going to be less than our average price for production of power, which on 2019 was $37 per megawatt hour. And unfortunately, due to their redactions, that's what we can share with you. But the entire group feels that going through this process, that we do have a competitive price for what's being offered. So question 2 is the GRU 2020 10-year site plan states that Deer Haven Steam Unit 1 or 80 megawatt plant is scheduled for retirement. Is the 50 megawatt PV facility designed to replace the unit? And if so, what other additions are planned to make up for the loss in 80 megawatts? That is correct. Deer Haven 1 is scheduled to retire on December of 2022. So after this unit retires, GRU will still have adequate generation sources to serve its customers reliably, but the energy from the solar facility will supplement GRU's remaining generation sources. Because it's intermittent, and the fact that the long-lived commercial viable energy storage is not available, solar generation is not considered a replacement for traditional generation. So it's considered a supplement to it, but not a replacement. And I think that answer is just there and there twice.
Yeah, I think it is in there twice because it probably bears repeating.
All right, question number 3. The proposed contract includes specific dates when GRU could purchase the proposed.
Actually, Eric, you've got a previous version of this. Can I bring up a current version?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. I was wondering if that were the case.
Yeah.
You know, and while you're bringing that up, I'll mention that, you know, given our history with redaction and trade secrets, you know, it's understandable the community is kind of concerned about this. But the power purchase agreement that we're talking about is so different in context and form than the one that shall not be spoken about was. It's it is somewhere in the order of 80%. It's almost 80% lower in cost, just even in round numbers that we've disclosed here. And you're only paying for the energy that is delivered. Truly, there's no capacity payments. There's no fixed payments. It's a small part of our overall $90 million a year fuel budget, as opposed to that being almost 100% of the addition to the fuel budget. So this is a prudent decision. It fits very nicely within our operating confines, and it's economical, as well as being incredibly environmentally friendly for the utility. You know I'd have to say some things, right?
Absolutely. And it was well said, Ed.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Chuck, are you able to share your screen? Do you have the questions pulled up yet?
Eric has it again.
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up again.
Isn't it marvelous with this technology?
Yes. I'm always surprised when it works. I guess I shouldn't be by now.
All right.
Is marvelous the right word?
We'll leave that hanging.
Yeah. There you go.
All right. Can everyone still see that?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so beginning at question 3 again, the proposed contract includes specific dates when GRU could purchase the proposed facility. The cost per megawatt of PV power has been dropping precipitously. What happens if GRU invests at the current price and the price of PV continues to drop, leaving GRU with a facility generating power at an uncompetitive price? How would it be possible to build in this eventuality into the contract? So GRU is not going to be will be purchasing energy from the facility, but not an equity position in the facility. So at a future date, we'll have the option to decide to enter negotiations, potentially participate. The market of PV would be a consideration at that future date, whether we jump in to try and negotiate and purchase a facility or not. As a reference, the market price for utility size solar has dropped by a factor of 10 in the last decade. The present price is low enough to make it competitive with other sources of carbon-based generation. The annual cost of this energy is projected to be less than $4.3 million and also represents about 4 to 5% of the annual fuel pass-through. It'll be constant over a 20-year period, so you won't see any escalation in that. And while the market may see further declines in the offerings, it's highly probable that fossil fuels have bottomed out, as we're seeing. We see a lot of natural gas at a very low point now. Do we expect it to continue into the future? At some point, but we also expect it to eventually come back up. Additionally, the income tax credit for solar, which is currently at 30%, is a major driver for these large solar installations. And at this point, Congress has not extended that beyond 2023. So therefore, any projects in the future would have to come down significantly in price to overcome that 30% tax credit to really become competitive in the future.
Gee, Eric, I could just, you answered that in a much longer way than I would have. My answer would have been no. You don't enter into a 20-year agreement for somebody to build this type of facility with the idea when it's, you find it uneconomical that you simply walk away from it. It's just not the way it works. The beauty of this is that we're getting that at very economical prices. I mean, you can tell the folks, Eric, how low gas prices are and how low we're producing, yet this is competitive with the overall cost of our generation. To think that there's much more downside is I don't think in the future. I mean, when you have wells that are literally not being able to produce because the price is lower than their cost of extracting that, that the gas prices can't get much lower, that there's much more upside cost as opposed to downside potential reductions. And utilities do this all the time. We're in the business of building long-lived assets and knowing that you make the best decisions based on the models that you have at the time. And I think this is a very prudent decision in that it's not also a base load facility that you're buying into. It is a supplemental power source. It's a kind of a small portion of our overall generation capacity, but it is significant enough, as Tom said, to make a difference. And it is one of the building blocks, in addition to the biomass plant, of GRU going to 2045 and 100% renewable. So I guess I did end up talking longer, didn't I, Eric?
That's a lot more than no, Ed.
Yeah. Okay, never mind.
But you get to do that, though. You're the GM.
Until the chairman tells me to shut up.
Not yet. Close, Ed. Close.
All right. So the next question talks about our IRP and the fact that we've just completed integrated resource plan, talking about 100% renewable power sources by 2045. It also calls out that the 10-year site plan states that our 2 natural gas units must be retired in 2026. Those are our gas turbines. And how does this PV facility fit in these plans? And what is the overall plan to achieve 2045 goal? And I'll give a short and a long answer, but getting to 100% renewable, there is no magic bullet that's going to get us there. There's a lot of considerations and different iterations and steps to get us there. So this step, this 50 megawatts of solar is actually the next step to get us towards that goal of 2045. Last year, DRE generated about 33% of its generation from renewable sources. This PPA will help GRU get closer to 38%, which, as Chuck pointed out earlier, is, I believe, the largest in the state by far as percentage generated from renewable. Keeping in mind the 100% renewable goal, we're also looking at reducing emissions from our existing fossil fuel plant to help with that. Part of that consideration is the conversion of Deer Haven 2 to natural gas to lower the dependence on coal and also reduce the emissions coming out from that by about 50%. And so the plans, in addition to that, the plan is scheduled to retire the 2 Frame 5 units, which are gas turbine units, in 2026. But there is a possibility they could remain serviceable past that once we look further into that. So they don't have a lot of runtime, but any economic decision will have to be made once we get closer to that point, whether they're retired or not. So that was kind of a long answer to say that this solar is the first step to reaching that 2045 plan. But there's a lot of other things that we have to consider and also move around and make changes to reach that goal by 2045. Some of it is technology based, some of it is making modifications to the existing generation that we have. Okay. So question number 5, in addition to 3 retirements, the 2020 GRU 10-year site plan forecasts a growth of about 1,800 gigawatts per year, gigawatt hours per year in 2030. So the difference between 2020 and 2030 is about 100 gigawatts per year in addition. The rate of 2.8 gigawatts capacity per megawatt hour sold at a 48% capacity factor. This is tantamount to needing additional capacity of about 35 or 36 megawatts simply from the growth in demand in 10 years. The proposed facility is 50 megawatts. How is this capacity determined? What are the measures are planned to achieve needed capacity? And how does the facility contribute to the overall system plan? We did a number of things to try and determine the size of the facility. The main driver was called an A study, which is an error study. And what it does is it tells you basically how much solar you can add to the system without having a negative effect on your system. Number one, being able to control it, and number two, being able to stay compliant with NERC guidelines. There were a number of scenarios run during that study, but effectively what came back from Burns and Mack was that 50 megawatts was about all we could handle with our existing generation configuration. Any additional will require something additional to go with it, some additional type of generation, either fast start or what have you. So all of that was factored in to the answer. A part of it was also the turn down ability of our units, the ramp rates of our units. And so we coupled all of that together to come up with a 40 to 50 megawatt range that was presented in the ITN. A couple other factors is due to the magnitude of GRU's energy debt right now. For the foreseeable future, replacement generation capacity, if and when needed, will have to be bought from the marketplace or the grid. GRU's load forecast is shown on the 10-year site plan on page 30. Some of that load is not expected to grow appreciably because of the contract with the city of Alachua expires in March of 2022. If that is not renewed, then that would decrease GRU's needed peak demand by approximately 30 megawatts. So there are a few other things to be considered in there, but the main drivers were the A study to determine the size, our existing fossil fuel rate and how fast it can respond, as well as the debt and going forward, what purchases we make and what quantities and when. So question 6, is it possible that a hurricane could damage the PV installation? What maximum wind speed is proposed that the PV system is capable of withstanding? So this facility will meet all of the Florida building code requirements. It is also required to be insured, obviously to protect GRU as well as the developer's investment. And the contract structure would make it economically advantageous for the facility to be repaired by the seller and returned to service if there were damage. The proposed PV, question 7, proposed PV facility would be have a substantial impact on land use planning. What is the size of the proposed facility? Are there any other natural cultural resources on the proposed site that may impede, delay, prevent construction? How is the land currently zoned, and would the city commission need to annex the land? So Origins Energy is responsible for providing the site and all the permitting, construction, and operation. Origins has demonstrated experience in developing similar products in Florida and nationwide, and has evaluated their site and engaged qualified firms to prepare and submit required information for the permitting facility. It's not anticipated that the facility would need to be annexed by the city at this time. So question 8, the on-site battery for the proposed facility is rated at 12 megawatts. What would be the typical kilowatt hours per sunny day contribution to the proposed unit? How long will such a battery last in terms of number of generating hours? Does GRU have adequate backup capability to operate reliably in the event of a major PV outage? So the project is expected to produce about 124,000 megawatt hours annually. On the sunny day, the project could produce around 54 megawatts, but of course that varies at 54 megawatt hours, sorry. But of course that varies with the weather conditions and the season and so forth. The battery stores about 24 megawatts of energy, but that function is not really to serve load. It's really to dampen the changes of the solar output itself. And so in short, GRU does have enough generation function without the solar facility, and it adds to supplement what we already have through traditional generation, but not necessarily add to the reliability for the system. So the next questions were from Wes Wheeler, our member Wes Wheeler. First question is, this contract is solely an agreement that if Florida Solar 6, which is the seller, builds the facility, GRU as the purchaser will purchase the power produced subject to the terms of the agreement. Where do we stand with the interconnection agreement? Paragraph 4.1 per C. That section notes that this agreement is a required milestone, and Schedule N states that an applicant be submitted no more than 30 days from the effective date of the PPA. And then the parties have 10 months to complete. Where we stand with this, will it take that long? So the interconnection agreement is a completely separate agreement due to the volume of detailed engineering that must happen to make it right. The input of other utilities and the FRCC must also be received prior to executing the interconnection agreement. So those are some of the feasibility studies that we spoke about that GRU has to complete before that's done. The ultimate timetable can be impacted by the queue of projects and review of either entity, mainly FRCC, that GRU doesn't have any direct control over. So the interconnection application has already been received or submitted by Origist, and GRU is currently evaluating that. So we try to take into account some of the time frame of what has to be done to complete an interconnection agreement and include all the necessary parts. So we've already started that process and moving forward with the interconnection evaluation.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Member Wheeler has his hand raised.
Okay, Member Wheeler, you have a question. Go ahead with that.
Thank you, Chair. So just to cut to the chase, it's been submitted. Do we expect this to be coming back to the UAB, the City Commission, the interconnect agreement anytime soon? Do we have is it going to be 10 months from now before we hear anything? Do you have any idea of when we'll be looking at the interconnect? That's it. Thank you.
I believe I'm sorry, Chair, members, I believe the timeline that we did go to was anticipation of 10 to 12 months to get this done. I am not sure whether the interconnection agreement has to come back to the UAB and the City Commission. Tom or Ed may be able to answer that one better.
I wouldn't anticipate that would be an agreement we would have to bring back. It's more of an agreement outlining the technical interconnection and the effects of our generation versus FPL or Duke or something like that. So it just has to be fundamentally agreed on by FRCC and the other transmission recipients in our area. I wouldn't expect it would have to come back through. There's no dollars exchanged or anything like that. It's more of just the right to be able to do it. And the things they look for are whether this facility, if it was online, if it were to crash or go offline very quickly, what kind of impacts would that have to GRU's system if the power had to come from outside our system? How would we affect our neighbors? So that's the purpose of the agreement. And typically there are, at any point in time, there may be as many as 100 of these studies in the queue.
Thank you.
Okay. So question 10, and I guess it was really a two-part. So Member Wheeler was requesting that the staff prepare and submit to the UAB and Commission an updated Schedule N with actual calendar dates immediately upon execution of the PPA. Is also requesting that the staff forward to the UAB and Commission all the satisfaction of the milestone notices delivered by seller to buyer required by paragraph 4.2 within 1 business day of receipt of those notices. Or in the alternative, if the seller fails to timely meet a scheduled milestone and thus does not provide notice, that staff notify the advisory board and the commission of that missed milestone, whether an extension has been requested and staff's opinion on that requested extension. So the team GRU understands that this is a very high profile project, and that there's a lot of interest from the community, not only from the commission and the board, but the community as a whole. And so GRU will continue to keep the UAB and commission informed of progress with periodic updates as we're moving through this process to help satisfy some of that interest and concern. Okay, question 11, paragraph 2.1, parent B states that the facility shall be 50 megawatts of the commercial as of the commercial operation date. Why not make this a minimum of 50? In other words, starting with 50 and then building up and having the ability to scale up production. We may want only 50 now, but over the life of this 20-year agreement with extensions, we will likely need more as we transition away from our current generation facilities. So as we've talked about before.
I'm sorry, I think Wheeler, Member Wheeler had a follow-up question.
I did, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Wes.
Thank you. I appreciate your response to number 10 there. I would like, when you say timely updates, I'd like, as milestones are being completed or not, I would like to have the UAB informed as we come up on each milestone, even if it's in between meetings, so that we can just keep track of what's happening or what's not happening. And that's just so we can follow that schedule in and not put it off for a couple months and aggregate them. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, let me answer that. Actually, I mean, I would suggest that when we finish the presentation, you'll make a motion, and the advisory board will vote on, the context of that, because that's how we report to the body.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay. So jumping back into question 11, as we spoke of before, the size of facility was determined by the ACE study, which was we talked about in this presentation. So any additional tranches of solar could be added in the future to this site or at other sites in the area. So this particular project was limited to 50, but there's always the optionality going forward with the right conditions to continue to add more solar in different increments.
Yeah, and I would add, Eric, that if we wanted to add additional solar, we'd have to go through an RFP process anyway. It wouldn't, we couldn't just unilaterally add to, contract, right?
Right.
That's correct. The other thing I think it's worth mentioning here is that this project was sized based on what our system can tolerate with the minimum load periods, basically during the shoulder months. If we were to take the next tranche of solar, it would probably end up with a much higher level of dispatch. We don't expect to have to dispatch this unit, but we have the ability to regulate it a little bit if we have to, and we have the batteries in there to kind of absorb some of the large transient that these facilities experience. But to put the next tranche in there, the contract or a PPA would probably look different if we didn't own it outright, because we probably would be periods of time where we would have to dispatch it to a significant level. And again, going back to that presentation we did back in November, Here Comes the Sun, we showed slides that showed with the various levels of solar, the number of hours where we would expect to see dispatch. I don't know if you remember that, but it was basically red blocks and green blocks. Was that right, Eric? I think they were red and green. I remember the red part anyway. So as we increase the size of this stuff, there's going to be times where we just have too much power. It has to go somewhere. And I think we've made the point before too, the other game changer in this whole outlook going forward is commercially viable, long-lived energy storage. batteries or some their form of. And if that happens, that's going to be a game changer. And at that point, we could certainly bring in quite a bit more solar, because you could just simply store the energy, absorb it, and then take it back out of those storage devices when you needed it. But for right now, we feel like we're pushing the envelope pretty hard with this size of the unit. Now, once it's in place and we've run for a year, we may reassess that situation, and we may come to the conclusion, man, we can push a little bit harder and maybe add a few more megawatts.
Member Wheeler, did you have an additional question?
I did. Thank you, Chair. I understand completely, and I agree wholeheartedly with staff's analysis. I'm not asking for more capacity now. I'm just want to make sure that what we're calling for in this contract is a floor and not a ceiling. I understand, Ed, that we would need to go out and negotiate an increase in capacity, and I would expect staff to do that. But I want to make sure that that we all are under the understanding that we are able to go back and add more to this if we need to, that this contract does not limit us to 50 only. That's my concern. And that I know we won't need it tomorrow or the next year or maybe next 2 years, but 5 years, 10 years, we may. So I would like this agreement to have the ability to ramp up. And that's, if we can do that, if that's what you're saying, we can do that without having to change the PPA, then that's fine by me. I just want to get that point out there.
Well, wait a second. We don't have the ability under this agreement to ramp up anything. This is an agreement for a facility at or about 50 megawatts. As Tom suggested, each time we look at capacity, we go through an ACE study like this in conformance with our IRP. I just want to make sure that this is not a module agreement. This is for on or about 50 megawatts. And if I'm mistaken, Tom or Eric, tell me if I'm wrong.
You're exactly right, Ed. But I will make the statement that this agreement in no way impedes GRU from doing additional solar generation.
Right.
This party or another party in the future. And it will not restrict our system in the future either.
Thank you. This is a great first step. And the only point I'm trying to make here is I want it to be a first step and not the only step.
We all have aspirations.
All right. Looking at the next question, I think a lot of that discussion was actually covered for number 12. It was saying about paragraph 3.5 and the redacted attachment C do not explicitly state that the output may exceed 50. As noted in question 2 above, I would like to explicitly state that the parties agree to sell and purchase as much power as both parties agree is mutually beneficial. The annotations in attachment C, so stating however else that GRU and city staff best determines to incorporate the concept that 50 megawatts is a floor and not a ceiling. And so I think we've kind of talked through a lot of that. This project is actually oversized as far as the DC side and the panels being able to produce more than 50. But right now it is limited to at or about 50 to maintain reliability for GRU system. If we do take additional tranches, as Tom was saying before, it doesn't limit us, but it may look a little different as we continue to grow and add more solar to the system. Even at 50 megawatts, we do expect that there will be times during the shoulder months that we have to curtail and go below that 50 megawatt limit or output to make sure that we stay reliable and make sure that we stay balanced as a system as a whole.
Yeah, and I think it might be worth saying too that when we were putting the ITN together and looking at this and looking at what we thought we could tolerate, we could have gone out for, let's say, an 80 megawatt project. And as we demonstrated with our previous presentation or their update, we would end up dispatching that unit more than the 50 megawatt unit, which we don't expect to dispatch at all. So that additional 30 megawatts of capacity, you're going to pay for the capital to install it, but you're not going to get the same utilization out of it that you would with the 50. And of course, the provider the seller, he's still going to want to collect his money for that capital over the kind of the contract. So at the end of the day, the price per megawatt on average that you have to pay for a larger unit, at least with just clipping it and not taking the power, would be such it probably would put us over our average cost and not meet our initial financial criteria for the project. So that's why we went with 50.
Thanks, Tom.
All right. Moving on to question 13, paragraph 3.1b, first sentence states that the seller may terminate the agreement if financing is not available in time for completion and commencement of operation by December 31st, 2021. While the section is titled financing, it also appears to include a right of termination for non-financial reasons in the second sentence. Third sentence says that the right of the termination under section 3.1b shall automatically expire and be deemed to have been waived by seller on March 31st, 2022 if no termination notice has been given by seller, end quote. So what is the termination rights date? December 31st, 2021 or March 31st, 2022? If the latter, how can the termination date be later than the required completion date? And why are termination rights other than financing given in the financing section? So I think it's just a bit of a clarification there that December 31st, 2021 is the termination right for the seller in the event that they are not able to obtain financing. So that is their deadline. March 31st, 2022 is required before the required completion date, which is actually December 31st of 2022. So I think it's just a point of clarification that that's a termination date, that if they don't have financing by that date, it can be terminated by the March 31st date. The actual completion date is set to be December 31st of 2022. All right, question 14, paragraph 3.11, why 8, 10, and 14 years out? What is the rationale for these chosen years? And essentially that answer is because of financing. They typically limit how many times a buyer can go through the appraisal and negotiation process for purchasing the facility. So due to the ITC and limitations, the financing parties often limit the first opportunity until—
Yeah, we want to keep pushing now, okay?
I'm sorry?
I think that was a stray comment.
Okay. The contract provides the opportunity for buyout, but given the level of debt that GRU Energy has, it is highly unlikely that GRU would buy the facility before year 15. So essentially it's done for financing terms, financing parties, and being able to agree that the ITC is not at risk at year 8.
How much money?
And then just providing regular intervals after that first initial opportunity. Paragraph 3.9, question 15, paragraph 3.9, please explain dispatch down. I would like assurances that this does not include reduction of solar power reduction for reason other than FERC regulations, or not, if that is not the case. So kind of going back to the points that we made before, there may be times for operational reasons that GRU must dispatch or limit the output of the solar facility to make room for other units to come on or offline or to remain online. We also have to match generation with load. And there may be times in early mornings, again, shoulder months, where our other traditional generating units are at their bottom and they can't go any lower. But then you have a huge ramp up of or ramp down of solar or change in that solar output. So there may be times where we have to limit how much solar output is there based on the load and based on how much is coming out of the solar facility. The intent here is never to dispatch down for convenience. It's really for system reliability and to make sure that we stay in compliance with NERC. So essentially the answer to your question is we don't intend to dispatch it down or reduce the output unnecessarily unless it has something to do with system balance, system operations, or NERC compliance. All right, question 16, paragraph 4.2, parent B and C. As a general comment, not a question, I note the actual completion date may be as late as December 31st, 2022 if the seller elects to take the extensions authorized in this paragraph. So right, the planned completion date is December 31st of 2022. However, under extensions, this may be extended to no longer than December 31st of 2023. Question number 17, again, talks to the completion date, and the planned completion date is December 31st of 2022, again. Question 18, paragraph 15.2. So this is a very nitpicky question, but to be asked of legal staff, perhaps after the meeting. It addresses what happens if a facility is damaged or destroyed before the 5 years end of the initial term. What happens if this damage or destruction occurs within the 5-year period or during the extension? And so, Chuck, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we have an answer back from legal on that one yet.
That's correct.
Okay. So these were questions that were posted on Facebook, I believe 2 days ago, May 11th. So we'll go through and try to answer these quickly as well. 19, is there an opportunity for UAB members to interview current customers of Florida Solar 6 before making a recommendation to the City Commission? Customers either in the US or another country. So Florida Solar 6 is a project-specific LLC. So during the evaluation process, the team members talked to a number of the current customers, some of which are repeat customers of Origis itself. And we found that they have been very responsive and very, very diligent, and they do what they advertise very well based on customer feedback.
I mean, I think the origin of that question really is, what is Florida Solar 6? People could figure out what a Regis Origis organization is. You have to kind of get into inside baseball and understand that all these projects are financed in a non-recourse debt fashion, and as a function of that, they set up special purpose entities. So they, are remote from the parent company in terms of liability and things like that. That's how these projects get built. It's part of the construction financing and the operations of the business. They end up being folks that are employees of a Regis that are put on a board of an LLC and things like that. There's nothing unusual about any of this. It's the way the industry works.
Thank you, Ed. Question 20, what is the projected price of solar electric power in 2025, 2030, and 2035 for Florida or nationally? So I know in doing projections for prices of commodities and fuel, as soon as you write down a projection, it's wrong. And so it's kind of hard to predict what those numbers will be in 2025, 30, and 35. To make a point, though, I think that those prices are heavily influenced, and the biggest driver is the investment tax credit, or the ITC. Right now, if the current credit stands, it's slated to decrease from 30% to 10% on December 31st of 2023. So looking at that and playing into the equation, we believe that that's going to have a bigger effect on the price of solar at that point, and would have an effect of it actually increasing those prices. So hesitant to give a projection. It's a very long-term view, and so as soon as you write it down, there's a number of factors that could influence that. What is the projected megawatt, question 21, I'm sorry. What is the projected megawatts of customer-owned solar electric power in GRU service territory in 2025, 30, and 35? So in 2023, GRU is projected to have 11 megawatts of customer-owned PV solar connected to its system. So that's a projection just 3 years out. Again, hard to go out much beyond that with any certainty.
Well, it's quite frankly, it's outside of our control and ability to project. Actually, probably Barry or Wes would be better equipped to project that kind of stuff out.
Question 22, what operational fiscal impact would a 50 megawatt utility scale solar electric power have on existing power infrastructure over the next 20 years? So GRU is going to be installing infrastructure to connect the PV on its grid. This infrastructure is estimated to be about $1 million in association with this project. Additional tranches of solar beyond this 50 would have to necessitate, would mean additional CapEx commitments and also battery storage or fast start generating capacity. So it all depends again on that path that we take to 2045 and the different steps. We'll have to evaluate those as we go along. 23, does this additional 50 megawatt utility scale electric power have any impact on the retirement plans of any existing power infrastructure? And Ed, the short answer is no.
Yay! Good answer. That's real short.
The question 24, does entering into this 20-year PPA have a positive or negative effect or impact on GRU and City of Gainesville bond rating? This facility is not expected to have any impact on GRU bond ratings.
Although I would add, and I'll make it longer, it maybe would have if we were to buy it, if we were to construct it or to buy it without paying down more of our debt.
All right, thank you, Ed. Question 25, and I think we're almost done here. Is customer-owned solar electric generally viewed as a money loser for the local utility? There's quite a bit behind that question, but for planning purposes, customer-owned solar decreases energy served, and the fixed and variable costs for providing backup service to solar customers, nights, cloudy days, ramp ups and downs, and so forth, is all paid for by all GRU customers. I believe the next three questions were from a member, Jason Fultz, and I believe these are the last three. Number 26 is Origis using an in-house construction crew or contracting it out? So the means and methods for construction are at the option of Origis. From our conversation with them, though, on past projects, they have acted as a general contractor and managed some contractors. But ultimately, it's going to be their decision how they decide to complete the construction. Question 27, are there any incentives for this construction to be locally sourced? So Origis has on its own made the commitment to engage local firms and personnel for that construction. We estimate over 200 folks for up to 6 months of duration for construction. So short answer is yes. They have made the commitment to use local labor and local firms as much as possible to complete the work. And last question, to my knowledge, will the city's living wage ordinance apply to this project? Again, another short answer is no. And I believe that was the last one.
We have a question here from member Jacobson. Barry Japes, if you want to answer that.
All right, thank you. I don't have too many questions. Well, first I just want to start by saying, and I know you guys have said this already, but it's really impressive what you guys have been working on, both GRU and the city. Per capita, that would put GRU top in the state and one of the top in the country. It's easy for people to forget that when they see the big stuff FPL is doing, but per capita, not even close to what we're looking at doing here. First question or maybe comment, you talk about this being rate neutral or negative. Would you be better off to say that it's reducing GRU's fuel costs? Like, I don't want to see GRU get painted in a corner and say, hey, you said it was going to lower rates and it didn't. So because the money could be used to pay off bond debt and a lot of other things.
You know, you're absolutely correct, Barry. It will be on the energy side of the equation, not the rate side of the equation, but it will not be increasing our fuel costs. It should be decreasing them slightly.
Yeah, which is great.
Although, as you suggest, it depends on what the future market looks like for gas. So, and I take what you're saying to heart, Member Jacobson. We don't know what the future is, so that's why typically we always talk about rate pressure.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Just want to I always you guys get painted in a corner sometimes, quoted incorrectly sometimes. So just
yeah, I got a lot of paint on the soles of my shoes.
So as you're putting in all this extra solar, what's the impact going to be on the ability for people to install net metered solar? Are we going to be so far into capacity that the GRU is going to start telling people, oh no, we can't add more solar to our system because of all those reasons? You're hitting the your load capacities.
This is just my opinion at this point, but I don't think there's going to be any restrictions with that. The rooftop solar seems to be widely distributed throughout the community, which seems to make it easy to tolerate. What gives us fits if it was all in one place and the cloud comes over and it all disappears at the same time? As long as it's happening randomly across the community, we seem to be able to absorb it. In fact, Eric, you can opine on this as well. I don't think our operators out there really can see much of a difference when it gets cloudy versus uncloudy, outside of our air conditioning load drops off and our load drops off. So when the load's dropping off, the solar's dropping off, and they kind of complement each other a little bit that way. But I wouldn't think there'd be any restrictions, at least in the interim, as far as the physical capability of interconnecting it.
Okay, thank you. On the battery system, what kind of warranty, degradation guarantees, do you have anything? If we're looking at potentially buying the system in the future, you have, I know what the solar typically has for warranties, but what do you have on the battery side?
As far as GRU is concerned, I don't know we have any warranties per se. I mean, we're being told that they expect the battery life to last 15 years. And I think a lot of that will depend on how often, how deeply it's cycled on a daily basis. If they're just kind of sitting there, not being used much, they may last a very long time. If we drew them down every day, they'd probably be shot in a year. And then I think that's something that Origis has taken into consideration. And they have, I think, Eric, they had a model on that too, right? That they were looking at how often they thought they were actually going to distribute it, cycle it up and down, where they were coming up with their life, and that's how they calculated the price into the agreement.
Yeah, Tom, that's correct. They did most of their modeling on our requirement to limit the ramp rate to no more than 3 megawatts per minute. And so they sized the battery, the cycles, the solar panels, the output, all of it to meet that requirement. And so it really is up to them how they cycle. They talked about adding some supplemental batteries along the process, along the cycle of this contract. But yeah, they're really modeling to manage that change in output for us. So how they do that and how they manage that battery is to make sure that they can meet that. So effective warranties know that there's only a guarantee of performance from them to us to meet that ramp rate.
Okay, so on that topic of, so 15 years from now, they have a performance guarantee, guaranteed to GRU of, I can still handle this capacity for the ramp rate. So if the batteries are shot, that's their problem, and they have to replace them and add capacity.
Absolutely. And I think if the time came where we ever did consider buying the facility, we would certainly make an assessment, not just as the solar panel, but also the batteries themselves, to see where they were in their life cycle and factor that into any offering. and market valuation of the project.
I think this gets to that point of why a PPA is such a good thing. I know, again, you guys have said this, but it got such a bad name with the biomass plant, but it puts all the risk on someone else. All that downside potential is now shifted. Those batteries give up in 2 years, not GRU's problem. So I'm really pleased that you're going down there. And just one thing, Eric, you said a number of times there's a 30% federal tax credit for solar. It was 30% until last year. Now it's 26%. Then it goes to 22%. Then it goes to 10%. Now it could be that Regis has done some safe harboring, and that was kind of a question when we talk about the timeline. So if they terminate the contract next year or the year after, the new bidders may be coming in at a 10% tax credit, which I have a little concern about that could really hurt the numbers for GRU. That would put us in a bad place. I don't know if you guys have looked at that.
Yeah, I think part of your question, Origis, I think, has pre-purchased a lot of panels, as all these suppliers are, knowing that this was going to come into debate. That within the tariffs was also impactful to the industry as well. So I think they made advanced purchases and have that, so minimal impact. But yeah, down the line, I think it's a possibility that the pricing could go back up, or maybe they'll renew the program again.
One other kind of related to the PPA, as a PPA, will they be paying property taxes as opposed to GRU owning it and not paying property taxes?
Good question. I would have to think based on experience with GRU Renewable, the answer would be yes.
That's what I thought. So, which is good for the community. So that's.
Tom, I can jump in here a little bit if that's okay. I believe per Florida statutes that 80% of the value the project is exempt from property taxes. So they will be paying property taxes, but due to the exemptions for solar in Florida, it'll be reduced amount.
And then I think probably, let me just make sure. Yeah, the last thing I had, I just have to, because no one's really, hasn't really talked about the redacted issue, which I fully appreciate and understand. I just bid on a project and now we have to rebid it and everyone's seen my numbers, so it's painful. But it is hard. I mean, we are being asked to say, vote up or down on some numbers that someone else has seen and we haven't seen. And this is not a question of trust of you guys, but are we doing our fiduciary responsibility when we can't see the numbers? So I'm not saying I can't make a decision without it, but it's tough, and I think a lot of people will and should have heartburn over that. So not a question, just thought it was important to talk about.
Well, I can answer that, Barry, because I mean that's been heartburn for the whole group, and the reality is, it's the manner in which business is done with municipalities, because everything is on a bid basis, and they have to maintain that confidentiality, to keep the bid process competitive as it should be. We were able to say that, and this is based on Regis's give, if you will, that it's lower than our own average costs, which I think at least frames it in a manner that, it's not like we're entering into a biomass PPA where the all-in costs were $160 a megawatt. We know our average cost for 2019 was $37, so we know it's below that, and we can disclose it's below that. So that puts it in a whole other ballpark. As well, it shows that there are no capacity payments. So there's not $75 million or $0 are being spent for capacity, whether we take the energy or not. So this is simply an energy-only contract for less than $37, which we have the ability, what's the word I'm looking for? To take a certain amount of regulation of that energy. So, it's not even close. It's not even in the same arena as the other biomass PPA. So I wanted that to be said with your heartburn, because I would have loved to have been able to bring back something that had no markouts, any redaction of the agreement whatsoever, but we couldn't.
No, understood. And it should be pointed out again, this is fixed for 20 years.
Yes.
15 years from now, with even the most modest inflation, that's a great number. So, no, it's an exciting project. And also, I finally want to say, on the battery side, I'm excited to see the batteries involved. First, it helps the current project, but as Tom has pointed out several times, if storage technology gets to where we think it's getting to, it's a whole new ballgame where shut everything else down. And for GRU to have that experience under the belt, to be ready for that to happen, is a big step. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Member Jacobson. And we have a question from Member Fultz. Jason?
So just to follow up on question 18, we got a short answer of no, and I just want to know why the city's living wage ordinance would not apply to this project. And I'm just thinking in particular, to me, anytime that our municipality is spending such a tremendous amount of money on a project, we have a responsibility to make sure that as much of that money as possible is staying in this community and benefiting folks directly in this community.
I see
offer some
Bennett is
feedback,
on
Tom.
the phone. I don't know whether she's on the line or whether she want to opine on that or not, but basically we're not buying an asset, we're buying a commodity price. And that's really the reason why when they're building it, it's really their discretion as to how they build it and what they use. So it really, normally that living wage clause wouldn't apply to this type of an agreement.
I agree. I apologize. I couldn't find my unmute button quick enough, but no, in my opinion, the living wage ordinance does not apply to the purchase of electricity, which is what this is a purchase power of electricity.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. I think we've gone through all the written questions and member questions that were submitted earlier.
Mr. Chairman, we do have 2 members of the public standing by.
Okay, so do we take public questions before we have a motion? That's a question to staff.
I am going to need to let the attorney help me with that question.
I believe that your current rules, you take the motion first and then take public comment. We're looking at changing those rules, but right now that's how you've set it up. You can waive that and take public comment first.
Well,
if you would prefer.
I'd rather stick with what we used to do and still ought to do. And I want to make sure the members have gone through and had their say first, and we have a motion on it. We'll hear citizen comments before we make any decision. So that's what we've done in the past. So let's keep to that here. So let me ask if members, anybody has any question. We have a question from Member Wheeler here.
I was just going to make the motion. I'll wait if anybody else has questions.
Well, let's hear your question there, or motion.
Mr. Chair, I recommend that the UAB authorize the general manager or his designee to execute a power purchase agreement for 50 megawatts AC of solar power for a term of 20 years and other agreements as required with FL Solar 6 LLC, in general agreement with the draft PPA dated April 27, 2020, subject to approval by the city attorney as to form and legality, with the additional request that the UAB staff members keep us apprised on a monthly basis of the milestones being completed or not. That's my motion.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a comment first from Ed, or was that just a moving of the chair?
Oh, sorry, that's not me.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Member Jacobson seconds that motion. Okay. Now we have, I guess this is a point where we can have discussion on that. If nobody has a discussion, at that point, we can open up for citizen comment too. But at this point, does any member have a comment on this? Member Fletcher, Member Crow, sorry, Fletcher. You're muted. You're still muted.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm unmuted here. Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to all the GRU people that put in so many long hours on working on this. I know it was a real bear, and it's very impressive, and I'm really delighted to be part of this. But I've got a couple of questions here. I noted that Wes Wheeler's number 11, which talked about the relationship of this project to the overall plan for 2045, was actually very similar to some of the questions that I had posed that you guys saw. So I just sort of want to underscore that. It would seem to me that there is a 900-pound gorilla sitting there on somebody's shoulders about this overall question of how you achieve 2045 and when and at what price. And maybe that's not something we can, get some easy answer to immediately. But I'd like to point out that all our discussions need to be put in that context. That's just a comment. And the question I have is this. We heard the motion that's on the floor right now, but I'm a newbie on this committee, so maybe you can tell me how these things proceed. If the UAB wanted to have a comment or notations that might accompany this, do we have a vehicle for providing some comment or points that we'd like to raise?
At this point, staff is looking for a recommendation to proceed along these lines. Again, we can make a motion that would include something, but this is their contractual agreement needs to proceed on that. Again, we have a motion on the floor and a second, so we're looking to discuss what what our thoughts are on that to arrive at a conclusion today. And Member Jacobson also had his hand up, or was that a previous hand?
No, that's a new hand.
Okay.
I just wanted to say in response to what Fletcher was saying that what we've done in the past sometimes is a lot of times whoever made the motion would give a write-up that we'd send along to the city commission. Because a lot of times, the motion is very dry. It's to say, here was our thinking behind this, or we had these reservations. So I appreciate your sentiment that a lot of times something else should accompany it, and we have done that in the past.
All right, thank you, Member Jacobson.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Don.
I just had a quick question. I'd be interested in hearing the appropriate person clarify land rights. I'm wondering if that means the land will be leased or purchased.
Okay. Maybe somebody can answer that.
Chuck, do you know what Origis' plans are for that? Do we have any inkling as to how that might be going on?
Our understanding is that they have a long-term lease with a property owner.
Yeah, I mean, the point is GRU, when GRU is not selling land, GRU is not buying land. This is all under the PPA.
Right.
Okay, let's see. Member Jacobson has a new hand up again.
So just on that topic of the land, because it brings up a number of points, is the lease transferable? Is it a 20-year lease? So if we go to buy that that system, we're going to need to be able to transfer the lease of the land. And then what happens at the end of 20 years to all of this, including the land?
I think we have Lisa Bennett on the line that can address that element of the contract.
Yes, we've reviewed the lease for purposes of whether or not it was transferable, and yes, it is.
Okay, and so what happens at the end of 20 years to both the equipment and to the land?
Are you asking, can we still purchase it?
Yes.
Chuck, do you remember the length of the lease?
It's 20 plus 5 plus 5, Lisa.
That's the purchase power agreement. And
right, but I don't know about the land lease.
I'm pretty sure it
should match.
Coincides.
Lisa, I can jump in here. I just don't want to go anything that would cross the line for confidentiality with their lease agreement, but it is longer than the term of the 20-year agreement plus the 2 optional 5-year terms.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, we have Member Rockwell with a question. Go ahead, Member Rockwell.
I'm just curious if it is GRU's intention or if they are angling to eventually purchase this installation, or if that's just an option in there to keep, cover all their bases. But is that the sort of the plan moving forward? And I just want to also make sure that I'm clear that should that happen, then at that point they're no longer purchasing energy from what are they called, the solar, FL Solar, and then it would be part of their generating fleet at that point. And of course, you take over maintenance and operation, what little there would be for a solar panel installation.
I can actually address that. I mean, for a small utility, we have a lot of lessons learned with PPAs, and we also not only have the city commission, but we have the utility advisory board that we have a history with, and we got engaged in this as a response not only to the city commission's goal of 100% renewable by 2045, but also all the things that we've talked about, the optionality associated with the projects. So we weren't necessarily angling for anything other than to provide options for us. And, it's kind of a cafeteria plan. Some of those options came with very little cost, but, we'd like to have them in there anyway. In 8, 10, and 14 years, we're not sure the situation GRU will be in, but it would be certainly nice to have the ability to have that more firm than what was in the biomass PPA. Each one of the elements that we've really spelled out, and this isn't me, this is a testament to the folks that negotiated this within GRU, that spent the past year just going over this and going over it and going over it, is really a betterment of anything we've done in the past. They really took the lessons learned and applied them here. So yeah, we just are trying to bring the best financial deal back, the one that gives us the most solar that we can handle, and the most optionality. That's really what we're delivering back to the UAB and to the City Commission.
Okay, Member Wheeler has a question. You're still muted, Wes.
Thank you. So we're just purchasing power, and this is an agreement that if we have an interconnect in place and everything falls into place, we buy it from them. Would there be anything preventing this power producer from selling power to somebody else? I mean, if if it became profitable for both them and for GRU to transmit it. Would that be a possibility?
If that was the case, if solar went crazy high on the marketplace, we would just resell it. GRU would sell it. We wouldn't go back through the original seller. And I think it also goes back to the question of, would you purchase it? You got to look at the market drivers, why you would purchase this facility at all. We believe the the price we got on this power is a really good price. It's going to look even better as time moves on. And there really wouldn't be any financial incentive to purchase it unless they offered it at a price that was less than the net present value of the cost of the energy payments going forward. It would have to be severely discounted based on that. So I wouldn't expect that we would ever actually purchase the unit until you got to probably the 30-year period at the other end, if you just wanted to continue operating a facility or buying up a facility. And even then, I would think you'd probably negotiate with the party, for a different energy price.
No, you answered my question. If it got to be the point where solar was very attractive, other people wanted to buy it, then all the better for us. We could just resell.
That's right.
I'm sorry, Member Wheeler, were you talking about the actual energy itself we'd resell as opposed to the plant?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And my question being, what happens if all of a sudden there's a huge demand? We have a great facility. It could produce a lot more. We have customers who want to buy it. There would be nothing preventing us from either allowing the producer to sell directly outside, or as Tom just corrected me, we would just end up reselling.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I think is a win-win.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it actually takes you back. Again, I mean, there's these lessons learned, right? That was one of the things that was talked about with the biomass PPA was, we'll build it bigger and we'll be able to sell off, the power. Unfortunately, it was above market, and there were no buyers for people that were above market power. We're actually getting power that's below our cost and flat for the next 20 years. So we've kind of flipped the script on that type of analysis. It's the same kind of provision, but it's one that works for us because of the negotiation that the staff at GRU have performed. So that's a really good point to bring up.
Yeah, the other thing I think is worth noting too is that this technology is kind of modular. It comes in sections. For every so many megawatts, you have a converter. So we asked the economies of scale question early on, what kind of price difference would we get of a 10 megawatt versus a 20 or 30 or 40 or 50? And this unit's big enough that we're kind of getting the economies of scale that you would see for the technology. Adding another 10 megawatts wouldn't drop it down any. It would just kind of be an incremental add-on. At least that's what the market feedback was.
Okay, seeing no other hands up and the motions on the floor, I think it's time for us to go to citizen comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you just bear with me for a second, we should have Nathan Scop, who's been standing by. And Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I just want to let you know these are extremely patient citizens today.
Yes.
And we thank them for their patience. Mr. Scop, if you can hear us, please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, Nathan Scop. The fact of the matter, as previously addressed, is that the UAB is being asked to approve a heavily redacted 20-year draft power purchase agreement without knowledge of the cost of electricity being purchased under the contract. Specifically, the cost per megawatt hour is completely redacted, just like the biomass contract. Again, fiduciary duty was mentioned. It appalls me that members of the UAB, including members Jacobson, member Davis, and member Porter, would not understand that some of these points, these very important points, are very valid. Again, this contract is premature. It's premature for GRU to even bring this to the UAB at this point. They're asking for a blank check. This agreement is not fully definitized. It should be in its final form for final approval, so the UAB and the City Commission and the public knows what's being approved. This is just like the biomass contract, exactly like it. So my concerns are the redactions in the 20-year solar power purchase contract. in that agreement pursuant to section 15.13C, Roman numeral I, or double I, the draft agreement, GRU has sole discretion, folks, to find no basis for the seller's redactions in accordance with Florida law. Furthermore, and more importantly, GRU, notwithstanding GRU's claims of full transparency and the Navigant recommendations in the wake of the biomass contract fiasco, has sole negotiating authority to demand full transparency, again, to demand full transparency in the purchasing process as a condition precedent to entering into any long-term contractual agreement. We're not in the bid process, folks. We are in a contractual phase. We need full transparency. The redactions at issue, mainly dollar amounts, are excessive, overreaching, and not supported by Florida law. You don't have to take my word as a former Florida Public Service Commissioner. At least 2 UF law professors feel the same. And I want to remind this UAB that the GRET contract was litigated over redactions and other issues. So again, there is no betterment, contrary to Mr. Bilarski's claim. This is business as usual with another redacted contract. Furthermore, a decade ago, JEA entered a 25 megawatt power purchase agreement. The cost per megawatt hour was not redacted, and it was far under what this agreement is purporting to deliver power at. And Ms. Bennett knows that. Furthermore, again, we're giving GRU management a blank check. The draft agreement's not in its final form, and GRU is requesting approval to enter into agreement. No approval should be considered until the final agreement is reduced to writing, and GRU management should be told to wait and bring this back to the UAB and City Commission for approval when the contract's fully defenditized. Again, this is analogous to what happened with GREC and the biomass contract. The indicative cost under this contract from the limited information available is $38 to $44 per megawatt hour, but the UAB and the public and the City Commission will never know because the information in the contract's redacted. Mr. Bilarski says, trust us. I don't trust because of past track record. Prove it to me. Again, GRU claims no rate impact. Where's GRU going to make up the $4.2 million annual revenue requirement for this project? No discussion of that. Curtailment. Contrary to GRU's assertion earlier in this meeting, GRU can't curtail at will. It can, but it has to make them whole. Read the contract, folks. And again, lower future cost. We have a requirement for 2045. We need to buy this today. We don't need excess power right now. And maybe the cost will go down, but we're being rushed to approve a contract that's not even in its final form. It smells just like the biomass contract. Again, my comments are directed to the UAB as a whole, but specifically to members Jacobson, Davis, and Porter, who know right from wrong, who understand that these are very valid concerns, and who have a fiduciary duty to ask some of these questions and not just rubber stamp what GRU wants. What's happening here may be right, but it's not transparent. And until we have the transparency and until it's in its final form, it shouldn't be approved. And I think that's a very, very, very valid point. Politics aside, this may be a fine contract. We will never know until the redactions are unredacted. And so that's
Mr.
my
Chairman,
point, members.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Scop. That's more than your 3 minutes, and I think we get your point. And it's, again, thank you for your input.
Mr. Chairman, Brian O'Brien is also standing by to speak. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Am I live?
Yes, you are.
Very good. Who is the chairman today? I can't see you, gentlemen.
Oh, it's Mr. Porter, Dr.
And
Porter
ladies.
here. Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Wendell Porter.
Yeah.
Nice to hear you all are doing business as unusual as it may be over these modern difficulties we're going through. I do appreciate the work that you all do in trying to keep GRU in line over there. And I don't want to land this on any of the employees of GRU who I think are doing their best job, and Mr. Brown and Eric Walter are saying the things that they need to say to push this forward, but they are cheerleading for something that's not got the transparency that the citizens of Gainesville and the consumers of the GRU Electric deserve. the characterization that Mr. Bolarski sets up, that this will be better for our bond rating, is a perfect example of how these things get twisted around by the bureaucracy over there. That's completely on its head. The reason that he's trying to buy it as a PPA, which the mistake that he's already made before, is that he doesn't have any capacity in his bond rating. So everybody knows that, and to try to characterize it as this will be better for our bond rating is just a pile of doo-doo. The second point is that GRU failed to protect the customer's best interest when they negotiated the biomass contract. And given the $2 billion cost of that mistake and failure, there's no reason to believe that any citizen of Gainesville and the consumers of your power are going to trust him to, do this contract without transparency. So I would amplify what Mr. Scott said and try to save everybody a lot of time and money and encourage you to get a clean contract. These people, I'm sure, are a fine vendor, and they're going to take advantage of some big tax benefits. And the only way to get the best deal you can is to make sure that you're getting the advantage of those benefits, not like the failed biomass contract where all the benefits accrued to the fellow from Boston. He ran off with all the benefits and overcharged you on the facility. So let's not make the same mistake again. Let's try to keep the community on the same page. And it's pretty obvious from anybody attending their budget meetings that there's a big problem with the budget coming up. To try to feed this to the people of Gainesville and tell them it's not going to increase their power bills, you have another problem with history, and people haven't forgotten what happened to them. Likely another increase coming this year, the way it looks like it's coming down the pipe. So please consider waiting on this contract and getting us an unredacted copy so that we can see for ourselves that it's a good deal. It'd go a long way.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Getting some more.
Yeah. Thank
Sure,
you for your
thank you.
comments. I appreciate you chiming in today. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, those are the only callers we have at this time.
Okay. Thank you for that. That worked better than I expected. We've heard citizens comment, and we've had our own comments. We have a motion on the floor and a second. Not being able to see cues from people that I might have missed something and I'm getting a finger wag from somebody. I think it's time to do a roll call, whether we're in favor of this motion. So I think staff will do a roll call vote on this because there's no way to figure out who's saying aye.
Sure. Chair Porter.
Aye.
Member Wheeler.
Aye.
Member Jacobson.
Aye.
Member Miles.
Aye.
Member Rockwell.
Aye.
Member Crow.
You're muted.
Aye.
And Member Fultz.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously.
All right. Well, thank you for the wonderful presentation and all the data in there and your explanation of all the points to GRU staff. This meeting doesn't end the usual way because it's essential business only, if I'm not mistaken, Robin.
Yes.
And so I think this ends our meeting today. But again, thanks to all the GRU staff for putting that together for us.
I'm sorry, Chair Porter, I think we still probably will need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, right.
Whenever we're ready.
Yeah, go ahead. Somebody give me a motion.
So moved.
Okay. There's a motion and a second to adjourn. So with that, meeting is adjourned.
And I would like to add my thanks to staff for this presentation and this project. It's really impressive.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.